Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for attending. To the organizers, thanks for your efforts and for inviting me. I was in Ukraine on 17th of July 2014 as a freelance journalist, and since then I'm investigating the case. In November I talked with retired high-rank representative of United Nations, former diplomat, Professor Alfred Desires, about that investigation of GIT. And he wrote several reports to the General Assembly for political issues. So let's listen what he says.
Ich war nie ganz von der Methodologie begeistert. Also ich finde, eine professionelle Untersuchung muss wirklich alle Beweise auswerten, muss alle Seiten hören. Also die Möglichkeit der Fabrizierung, der Herstellung von Beweisen, das ist bekannt.
Well, actually, I thought I'm able to stop here, but I will translate just now what he says. He says he doesn't believe in the methods how the GIT worked. He says in the interview also later on that basically they have the conclusion first and searching for the facts they need. And I can confirm that's the same what happens in the media. And I'm very happy to know Max and Diana because they're a very good example on how to do it properly, because they do search for the facts and make their conclusions out of it. So I tried it too by traveling to the crash site, and I lived around 3 months between Donetsk and Luhansk and visited the crash site several times. And the first thing I observed, and which was kind of eye-opening for me, was how the crash site looked. It was different from what I read in the German media, because they said that... wait. How can I go back here?
You tell me where you want to go. It doesn't work. I put the slides for you here.
This one doesn't work at all.
I don't think
so. What am I trying here? I actually wanted the laser pointer to show something. Well, it was not, and we can see it in the report of the Dutch Safety Board, one crash site of 50 square kilometers as written in the media. It was basically 2 crash sites, and when you take a look to the right side, the very small area of grau, green, blue, and purple, that was the area where the main part of the plane came down. And when we take a look to the left-hand side, red and yellow, it looks very big, but actually here it was a cockpit which went down. And it went down in hundreds of pieces, so totally destroyed. So I was wondering from the very first moment, what did happen? How was it possible to, or which kind of weapon attacked the cockpit and destroyed everything? I will come back to that just in a moment. Next page, please. Yeah. My work there was to speak with people in the area about what they have observed. I talked with around 100 people, and one of them is him. Yeah, maybe you can second. So I was standing in the yard and no, we have the next. Okay, I tried to translate simultaneously.
Okay.
I was standing in the yard and I heard the sound of planes, 2 planes. It was 2 military planes. Yes, they were flying above me. One was flying straight and the other one turned. I was running through the yard to the street. So I was running on the street, and far away I saw how a plane was shooting a missile. And then another plane was falling from the sky. One part was falling directly down to the ground. The rest was continuing flying up to the next village. Well, out of those 100 people in the area I interviewed, it was 12 exactly who did see or hear military planes. So it is a minority of witnesses. But even more interesting to me was that not a single one saw a book launch. Nobody saw a weapon trail in the sky. And many people there didn't even understand what I was asking about. I was very close to the so-called launch site of the GIT, and they advised me to go to Bravo, or they didn't understand what I was searching there. So next folder, please. So the idea now was, us as journalists don't know how to judge on those issues. So back to the beginning, the methods of investigation. If you, as happened in Germany mainly, present bloggers and journalists as experts all the time, well, the results are as they are, not too much trustable. To me, it was important to ask former militaries, because I believe they are the ones who are able to judge, and it's really astonishing to me that I have never seen former German militaries, or retired militaries, or active militaries in TV talking about MH17. We have both types. We have those from the West who worked with NATO weapons. We have those from the East who worked with Soviet weapon systems. Here's one example. I met 20 of them, which is news in itself, of course, because there are so many who say they don't trust the scenario of book. It should be broadcasted in the media, but it wasn't. So let's listen what Colonel Bernd Biedermann says. Can you stop just one minute? I just want to add one sentence. So he worked with surface-to-air missiles in East Germany. It was called Coup, and the Coup later on was made into book. So let's listen. So it is not possible that there is a launch of a book missile and nobody recognizes it. There must be people who have heard it. Or to have seen it. It's over. Oh, okay. So I just don't show. Yeah. He says, from what he knows when they were shooting in Astrakhan for test shooting, that you could hear it still from 10 kilometers away, and that the weather trail, depending on the weather situation, of course, but very likely can be seen 8 to 10 minutes in the sky. And this area is densely settled. There are coal mines, there are factories, so there are around 40 to 50,000 people living. So really surprising that I didn't find those witnesses. What he said as well was that normally when a plane and a target is attacked by a book missile, it is not mechanically destroyed. It comes down to the ground as one piece and not as two pieces that we saw in the beginning. And he describes the system of that missile as spreading splinters in order to fire the target when it hits the tanks. And also it, with this radar ray, flies to the point of the highest reflection of the target, which would be the body of such a Boeing and not the cockpit. Just as a short summary. Next one, please. Here we have Colonel Dieter Klemann. He was a fighter jet pilot for 33 years, and he was the one who later on educated, who was chief of education for fighter jet pilots, and he contributed in aircraft in accident investigations in East Germany. So I showed him the pictures of the wreckage, and let's listen what he says. Here we can see is a picture of the cockpit, and we see a round hole. And I can see the two skins of the cockpit. The inside skin, it's more massive, and something went through, and it's bended towards the inside, but the outside skin is bended towards the outside. Well, from my experience, this can happen when an explosive bullet enters and bends the inside skin towards inside and the outside skin towards the outside. And as he explains, this interview is like 40 minutes. Also, these very small pieces inside of the cockpit, they're small. You can see very small splinters have hit lots of areas of the cockpit, and this could be from the explosion of those types of ammunition. Next one, please. Yeah. So I asked it, how can we know for sure if that happened or not? And Dr. Lothar Hertel, who was the chief of aircraft accident investigation in East Germany, unfortunately unwilling to talk on tape, but he told me, yes, we have electron microscopes to know if you have the wreckage pieces, which kind of objects impacted it. So today we have very modern devices, and the GIT, here the page of the report, did use such technology, but from what we can read, they didn't use it to check the wreckage itself, they used it to check alien fragments about which we don't know if they're genuine or not. So I went to the GIT and asked them about it. So next page, please. Okay, here we can see, maybe it's afterwards. No, we lost one video. Okay, we lost one video. So I was asking the GIT.
It wasn't a documentary, right?
It was
the
okay. Then I was outside in that moment. Yeah, they didn't answer the question if it was conducted such kind of investigation. They told me afterwards, yes, we will write you a letter. It never happened. I called them many times. Wim de Bruin, the press speaker, told me, you can try as much as you want, we will never answer this kind of question. That's the TU in Berlin, Technical University. I talked with them. Where can you maybe ask them, or can we maybe try with the pieces which are still laying around in East Ukraine to use that technology to check which kind of objects went through the wreckage? Because if it is ferrous or non-ferrous metals, already answers the question if a board cannon, for example, was used or not. But they totally refuse to do so.
Yeah, that's essential analysis.
Yes, that's the first, as the militaries, and Dr. Hertel told me, the first analysis which should have been conducted, but yeah, nothing of it. Next one, please. Yeah, so, but the report does talk about the jet scenario, and they give 3 reasons why it was, according to them, impossible that jet was responsible for the downing. The first reason is that we have around 350 impact holes, and if a cannon is used, it should be just several dozens. Well, nobody claims that just a cannon could have been used, but also a combination of a cannon and an air-to-air missile, which is a different story, of course. Second one, they say, well, we don't have radar images proving that there was a jet. The problem is that we don't have military radar data with raw data information. Not from Ukraine, not from NATO, not from Russia. So if we don't have it, well, we can't see anything, it's obvious, but doesn't convince me. And yeah, the third point, last one is, they said, well, look, we found 2 cubic pieces and 2 bow tie pieces, and it looks like from a book. But again, the problem is we don't know if these pieces are genuine. They were discovered months after the event. So what they say doesn't convince me to exclude this possibility. And to come to my last picture, This is one I made in 17th of July 2014 in Kiev in front of the Dutch embassy, and it shows first of all what is uniting people on the left-hand side, to be really sad about the victims, for the families, and there were hundreds of people in tears. It was very emotional. But it shows also how it was used politically in the very same moment already, and that without being proved until today. And well, I don't know if it will ever happen, but we are trying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy. Can you answer one of my questions?
Sure.
I remember that from the very beginning you were very sure that Russia did it with a book missile. What happened?
Yeah, I was.
Were you also influenced by media, or what your conclusion was based on?
Sure, I was staying on and living basically on the Maidan for 10 weeks, and I went every day into the UA Crisis Center at Maidan. So we were informed as press every day by Ukrainian government officials, by SBU, and by army representatives. So when that event happened, of course, the following days I went, and we received those informations today used by Bellingcat. It was the same story from the very beginning, and without knowing anything else, of course, I wrote about it, and I had to trust that yeah, it sounds convincing somehow. I don't know anything else. When I read in alternative media about that there could be different scenarios, I went to the crash site, and that is what challenged me, kind of.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and also thank you, Billy, for that presentation. And also, just to follow on that point that Jana asked to Billy, Max, you were also very skeptical. You're one of the, you and Jana and Bonanza, one of the few people looking at this story, filmmakers, journalists, that you're not making up your mind. In other words, you don't have a preconceived narrative in mind. You're absolutely evidence-led on your investigation, which is highly unusual in the polarized political atmosphere where you're meant to take either the NATO side, the Western side, or the pro-Russian side, or there's various other scenarios that are attached to either of those sides. But Max, what was your initial feeling when you first saw this story? Did you feel like you had an inclination as to who was at fault, or have you always remained objective on this?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't know there was a plane crash, and there were almost 200 Dutch people on board, so it came like a shock, and I didn't know what to think of it. I heard immediately it was shot down, so I believed that. And then, almost from the beginning, it was like Putin's missile. You see all the big headlines, and then I became very skeptical from the beginning, because if after a few hours it's already known what exactly happened, everybody regurgitates each other, and you get, on the spot, you get conflicting reports. And my doubts have only become stronger over the years. So the official version, if you challenge the official version, you're already a truther, and you're already a Kremlin troll, and you're already, so yeah, it's not nice, but that's part of our job.
Yes, and also recently, you're going to show us a summary of leaks in a second, but the BBC Monitoring did a kind of a hit piece on you in the last week or so, right before the London event, and they were basically picking holes in claims in your leaks and so forth. And by the way, you did document a star witness in a BBC documentary that gave a very different version of events than what was portrayed in the actual BBC program. As an experience,
to give you one example of the quality of the BBC hit piece on us. We reported in the Dutch military document there were 11 BOC positions, and then in the BBC report, so there were 11 BOC positions, 7 Ukrainian and 3 Russian. So 7 plus 3 is 11 according to the BBC. They still haven't corrected this, but that shows you how fast they are with judging and having they have their own facts, and they claim we are truthers.
So the BBC is struggling with basic arithmetic as what you're saying.
Yeah.
Good.
It's the least of their problems, seriously.
So, and just, Jana, I want you also to get your observation. Based on your survey of the media coverage of MH17, how much or how often do you see what you know to be misreporting or disinformation that's coming through mainstream sources? I mean, you and Max can both comment on this. What percentage do you see this quite often since the downing of MH17? Is it a common occurrence, in your opinion?
Well, I don't really remember any article or report that was up to the point, exploring, giving evidence and facts. Basically, they're pieces of pure propaganda. Any reports come to your mind? They're not propaganda? No, not that seriously.
Not many.
If you can name one, I don't remember. And I was in the BBC documentary. They interviewed me for more than an hour, and then like 10 or 15 seconds they to quote, of course, out of the context, and they framed me, of course, as propaganda journalist, and that I was lying, but what they were talking about, they didn't know what they were talking about. I knew what I was talking about because I was in the apartment of that photographer who took, presumably, the plume picture. And I never claimed that it was a fake picture. I was doing this video for Max because he was studying, exploring this, this picture. So I knew 100% what I was talking about, that I don't know if the picture is fake or not, but the photographer's story has changed, and it doesn't match the reality of his apartment. So what did BBC? What BBC did? They never got into the apartment. They flew a drone on the other side of the building, proving that what I'm saying is not true. That's how they do their propaganda. If you think it's a proper reporting on MH17, well, maybe I don't know what journalism is really.
So they definitely had a preconceived verdict or conclusion already.
Well, they go into a very small detail. Did the photographer go to the balcony and take the photograph, or did they look from the window, make the photograph? And she's totally right with her observation. And the official version, he looked out of the window, he saw the plume. It's not possible because the balcony is in the way. And it's very easy to verify. When you're there, you see it all. But when you film it, and you have Elliot Higgins come with his expertise as a couch analyst from YouTube and say, oh, it looks from Google Maps, you can see. No, you cannot see it. You have to be on the spot. So we will, in a future report, we will deal with the BBC. We just have more important things to do, but we'll do it in the future.
Yeah, you were asking what changed Billy's and Max's mind. The same with me. It's only groundwork that makes you understand a thing or two, more than a thing or two. So it's absolutely essential to go to the crash site and do your investigation. So I admire these guys for doing this. Well, you can see they're very, again, what I like about all the people that are in our documentary, and I'm very grateful to them because not very many people go to crash sites and make up their own mind. All these people, they're not shouting, they're not hysterical, they're not accusing. They're very common sense. They don't rush to conclusions. They see the evidence, they analyze the evidence first, then they present them. This is the only right way to do it, if you ask me, with such serious matters as this crash. So.
And also, there's been a lot of hype. Last thing I'll say is a lot of hype, a lot of publicity, a lot of MSN mainstream media features, a lot of awards given out for open source investigation. And
it's okay, let them have it.
This is where a lot of the attention is going. But when you go on the ground to investigate, you have spoke to many witnesses, things like, and Billy also attests to this, jet fighters being in the air at the same time as the passenger airliner. This is something that's almost not seen in a lot of the mainstream reporting or in the a lot of the material the Joint Investigation Team has put out as well. could you have known that? Well, from being an open source investigator, it's absolutely.
You could have known if you would have watched the BBC Russian version from Mrs. Ivshina that there was a report immediately after the crash, the same day she put it in the YouTube BBC channel, that there were fighter jets, witnesses talking, and then the BBC took it down after a few hours because it wasn't according to the standards of the BBC, this report, but they just took out the report with the fighter jets. So people already copied it and rerun it on YouTube, and then I became also interested. And there's simply so many witnesses on so many locations in Donbass who heard or saw fighter jets, and these people have been bombarded for weeks. They know what you're talking about. They're not lying. They were there. And then when they ask people, but did you see that the plane shot? No, I didn't see that. I only heard the plane. So these people are also very honest. And then we are truthers and conspiracy thinkers. But if the official versions doubt there were jets in the area, then really that's a conspiracy theory. That means all these witnesses are lying.
Yeah, it's impossible to ignore the fact. And Max, I really want to tell a story about another Western journalist. It's Mr. Ackermans. He interviewed a witness. He never showed a witness. That's a principal matter for me and Max. We decided if people don't want to go on camera, we don't show them. We still collect the evidence, but we don't cover our witnesses. If they're brave enough to speak up and give their mind and give permission to put it on in our documentary report, then we do it. So he filmed this witness, covered him, and gave him like 10 seconds saying that he saw a plume.
And that the man is very scared. It's dangerous to say this.
And the man is very scared.
So he has to be anonymous.
Yeah, so he's anonymous, and he implied that many people saw a Buk missile plume, yeah, not launch of a plume. And well, this time when we went to Donbass, we've been able to trace this witness, and he gave us his testimony on camera. And the amazing thing is that it's not the plume that Ackermans implied, that's for sure. We're doing another research, still, checking all the facts. But what the amazing thing is that that witness also says that he saw a fighter jet.
Yeah.
So how do you do your journalistic work really if you don't check the whole story? You just hear what you think you can use, twist, take out of context, and then just make it to frame somebody. Is that really what journalism is about?
Not according to me.
Well, we're going to, in just a moment, Max is going to give a summary of the leaks that Bonanza Media has released to date. And after that, we'll look at another video clip, a new video clip, and also he's going to unveil a very new leak that they haven't shown to the public yet. It's going to be very interesting. Now, I might add that Bonanza Media has a completely unique approach to this investigation. Most documentary film production companies will do the film, they'll wrap the film up and move on to another project. Bonanza Media is doing this concurrently with new leaks coming. They're doing live streams, they're putting this out into the public, they're vetting everything, obviously, double, triple checking everything to the best of their ability, and also using other experts to corroborate information and so forth. And also producing new parts or mini documentary segments at the same time. This is a totally innovative way, I would say, in terms of investigative journalism and filmmaking, combining the two together, which I think Bonanza Media is leading the way especially with this investigation into MH17. So I'll hand it over to Max. He's going to give us a rundown of what has been released to date.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago we started very modestly with one document that was already leaked by a Ukrainian website. It's a letter of the Dutch prosecutor, Mr. Westerbeek, to a colleague in Kiev. The Ukrainian is about Mr. Tsemak, who was captured by a Ukrainian team and brought to their side. Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago we started very modestly with one document that was already leaked by a Ukrainian website. It's a letter of the Dutch prosecutor, Mr. Westerbeker, to a colleague in Kiev. The Ukrainian, it's about Mr. Tsemak, who was captured by a Ukrainian team and brought to their side, and he was later exchanged as a prison. And this letter of Mr. Westerbeker to Mr. Storozhuk is about that the Dutch would really like to force or to really strongly recommend to the Ukrainians to keep this suspect, the Dutch call it a suspect, and keep him arrested and ready for interrogation. As we all know, the Ukrainians, they exchanged this man for a Russian prisoner. There was a prisoner swap. But we thought, let's start modestly with a leak. It's not a very spectacular leak, but the official leak, the Ukrainian leak, had the name blanked out, marked, so we thought it's nice to start with this. Then we had a second leak. You want to say something about it? No? Okay. Then there was a training manual, sort of Q&A for the joint event, predicting some questions that will be coming up and define answers to it. And in this document, it was quite remarkable. They expected a question about what exactly type of missile was used to shoot down the Boeing. And they say it was a 9M38 type missile. There's only two types, one with butterfly shrapnel and one without. And they expected a detailed question which of the two it is. Because in the animation later they showed there was butterfly shrapnel flying around, but they didn't give this exact type, they just keep the general type. And even in their training, they just talk around it and they don't want to answer the question. So this I find very intriguing. Then the Australian Federal Police, they made a report. It was Operation Avanella. They collected evidence from open sources and from other sources, maybe SBU, that we don't know exactly. But what struck us with this analysis of 12 pages is that they were analyzing open source pictures that were already 1 year ago in the internet, and they didn't have any original picture. It were all secondary pictures. It was low resolution. They were cropped. So they were wasting their time on things that we had seen already 1 year ago, and we're still waiting today for the original pictures. They still have not been published. So that I found remarkable that the Australians did not get from the Ukraine Secret Service immediately all the original pictures. Let me see. This is a Dutch document. Yeah, this is Boris. We read this report in English and in Dutch, and we thought, wow, this is a witness who saw a smoke plume, and he heard fighter jets, he heard a loud bang. We spoke to this witness. Maybe you want to say something about it?
Well, at the moment, we are preparing a report about this witness. We interviewed him. Everything he says complies with what he said to GIT. Interesting detail, he was approached by the investigators because he published some information that he saw instantly. A few days after he was approached by investigators via social media. He didn't agree to meet with them. He just agreed to give an interview via, I don't remember how they interviewed him, telephone probably, yeah. So that was amazing because, and they were willing to travel to Donbass to meet with him.
Yeah, and it was not Ukrainian phone number he was calling, but it was +31.
Yes.
So somebody from the Netherlands called
him.
It
was, yeah, somebody Dutch. So they, a few days after the crash, not a few days, a few months, I think, yeah? No,
almost immediately.
They were willing to travel to get his testimony of this plume that they didn't know the origin of, but they were interested in the word plume, I guess, to talk to the witness. But they came to get debris only 4 months after, so they were not willing to come collect the debris and make proper investigation, but they were willing to come for the witness who saw some plume. But the thing is, and it is in the paper, in the official GIT document that we leaked, and it's in testimony of the witness that he gave to us, the story that the plume was horizontal. It was not... And not from the direction of alleged crash site. So it's a totally different story that we're going to present to you soon. Well, hopefully, maybe this month.
Then we come to a very interesting document. It was a document that was never sent. There's an underlying Dutch document. It's from the military intelligence unit. We decided first to publish this concept document because it's in English. And the interesting thing is it shows all kinds of bug positions from the Ukrainians and from the Russians. And spectacularly, the 3 Russian positions, they're all in Russia. And the Ukrainian positions, there are 2 very close, not very close, but very close to the anti-terrorist operation. We were surprised that the Dutch military says 1 week before the presentation of the Joint Investigation Team in September 2016 that the professional military intelligence of the Dutch, who has access to United States intel, to NATO intel, to satellite data from all countries, did not have reliable sources and not reliable information that there was any bug dealer from any country close enough to the site where the Boeing was hit. So, and then like Volkskrant and others, they attribute now quotes to me that I claim that this is proof that there was no bug. No, they're lying. I just quote the military. They didn't have reliable information and sources about this. That means maybe they are wrong, and that some people with wisdom of the crowd or with the internet or I don't know what, they find the reliable evidence. We're going to see during the court case if it's in the 36,000 pages, this kind of proof. But the professionals who are supposed to know these kinds of things, they claim, they write, they don't have the evidence. And then there was some rumor, oh, this is Max and Jana, these are RT Putin trolls. There's a fake document, 100%, only to 1 day later find out, maybe we trapped them, I'm not going to comment on that, that there is an underlying Dutch document of 3 pages with the signature of the general mayor in place, confirming everything that we published the day before. So, what do we have next? Yeah, additionally, you want to? Yeah. So there was an additional document about one bug position that was not mentioned in the original document, and this document explains, yeah, there was one extra one, was even closer to the crash site, but that one is so broken that it could not be used. So they decided to make a special report of this to make it complete. Then we're going to a very interesting part, that is our Alexander Albertovich. This is, let me see. Here we have the Dutch preface, the tablet that explains what's going on. So there was Mr. Alexander Albertovich Bozenko, born 18 August 1955, living in Yanakivo. He saw on TV in Ukraine and in Donbass that the JIT is looking for witnesses. And this man contacted the Dutch and they had a Skype conversation. Because the address is there, Chornomorskaya Ulica, so Black Sea Street 58A, we decided to go there and, well, knock on the door. Which is maybe a good moment to start the next video. Is it there?
Our new report, based on the testimony of this witness. It's 5 minutes, so let's watch it and then discuss. Yep.
Usually when going to Donbass, we search for witnesses going from door to door, quite literally.
This time it was a bit different. We knew exactly who we were looking for.
Alexander! Alexander!
We didn't catch Alexander the first time around. His neighbor said he went to Ukraine for a few days to get his pension, and she gave us his mobile number to arrange a meeting.
So we did, and a few days later finally met Alexander and heard his story.
Так главное, тут никогда пассажирские не летали. Никогда.
Александр Альбертович, расскажите, 17 июля 2014 года, где вы были, что делали?
Я находился тут, на огороде, а вот тут у меня были помидоры. Вон, пустое место, но тут летит, вот тут почти вот, где вот тут деревья, орех, пассажирский. Удивился большой, никогда тут я не видел пассажирские самолеты. Облака вот сюда правее, и вот так летел. Его отчетливо было видно.
Вы же не знали тогда, что Боинг. Почему вы поняли, что это пассажирский самолет?
Так он по объему больше. И летели Боинг, а рядом летят два истребителя. Крыло в крыло, почти крыло в крыло.
Крыло, 100 метров, 50 метров.
Я не могу точно сказать. Крыло почти в крыло.
Понятно.
А куда военные самолеты полетели, вы говорите?
Они следом по этой траектории шли.
То есть следом за пассажирским?
Да.
А вы еще видели самолет пассажирский или он уже скрылся?
Он еще чуть был виден, а эти уже вот там показались.
Alexander said he told the same story to the Dutch investigators via Skype way back in 2015.
That's when we had to tell him we already knew it and came to check.
А почему вы решили и как вы вообще решили позвонить следователям?
Ну, было по телевизору номер, который не оплачивается, так и так. Кто знает об этой трагедии. На всех телеканалах было.
Вы решили позвонить, и что им сказали?
Сказали, что летел пассажирская, сзади два истребителя. По той же траектории.
Сколько раз у вас был контакт?
2 раза.
Только 2 раза.
А зачем второй раз они перезванивали?
Говорит, так направление было. Я говорю, какие дальше города? Я говорю, дальше Кировск. Но летел не по Кировску, а левее. Как раз на Петропавловку.
Они спросили вас про БУК?
Они говорили, а там установку видели? Я говорю, не было тут установок.
Well, that's probably when the Dutch lost interest and never called again.
Or ever came to check the witness testimony.
Рядом. Рядом. Сюда.
Don't be deceived by Alexander's simple looks. Despite his simple, uneasy life, he tries to keep up with the modern world and is quite smart and analytical.
This GIT witness was the one who pointed out to us the inconsistency in Wiretap's narrative, published by Ukrainian Secret Service, when the MH17 wreckage was still burning.
Значит, самолет рассыпался в воздухе в районе шахты Петропавловской. Первый 200-й, значит, первого 200-го.
Луганской области. Шахта Петропавловская.
В Донецкой области нет шахты Петропавловской?
Нету, возле нас нету.
There's no such mine in the area where MH17 was falling apart and crashed, says the local. Did SBU edit the content of wiretaps to accuse the rebels of what they didn't do?
We did fact-checking. Other locals confirmed there is no open or closed Petropavlovskaya mine anywhere near Petropavlovka.
But in neighboring Lugansk region, near Lysychansk town, there certainly used to be a Petropavlovskaya mine, now closed. And 14th July 2014, just 3 days before the MH17 crashed, rebels did down a fighter jet exactly in that area.
So is that what the wiretap was really about? Because now it certainly sounds like it.
Now Max is going to be discussing, Max and Jan are going to be revealing a new leak, which hasn't been made public yet, so you will be the first to see this, and they're going to be offering commentary and analysis along this. I will say, according to Max and Jana, they're very excited, and this is a very crucial piece of information in their investigation. But Max?
Yeah, we didn't also cover the London one, the leak that we, yeah, in London. How did it? Yeah. Oh, it's not included. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Or it's not. I think it is. No. Okay.
This is the one,
Uh,
if you want to discuss it.
Yeah, I think we should discuss it a little bit. Yeah, can you? Okay, it's not. Never mind. Well, basically, there was a new leak that we presented in London on the 3rd of March. It was minutes, yeah, GIT members, all GIT members except for Malaysia. We're discussing different issues, but what was the most interesting part in this to us is that they state there that U.S. didn't provide the official investigation with any material. And this discussion was back in 2016, right? So in 2016, GIT didn't have any information, any data on MH17 from the US. So.
Yeah, and
Sorry, may I add that in the night when it happened in Kiev, the people started to talk, well, we know it was the rebels, the terrorists in the east, because Americans said they have the satellites. So, and John Kerry appeared several times in the following days to say they do have those satellite images. So that is how the narrative was made internationally, and that's why this point is so important.
Yeah, but I would also like to refer to a recent crash in Iran, where everything was determined very fast, and the major data that was provided by the U.S. So they were very fast to provide data on this occasion, but not with the case with MH17 for some reason.
It was the downing of a Ukrainian airlines passenger airliner from Tehran International Airport right around the same time the Iranians and the Americans were facing off, and there was expected retaliation following the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. But what was interesting about that, Jan, not only was it the American satellite images that proved an Iranian, or seemed to prove an Iranian anti-aircraft battery had shot down the plane, but also Bellingcat was also involved in the open source images. So everything was kind of released immediately, and the Iranians were forced to admit that they did make a mistake, that they said, and shot down this passenger airliner. But then the question is, where is this satellite imagery for MH17?
so then we're coming to our fresh leak today. We prepared 25 screenshots. We're going to read it out loud, and we're going to put the document on a Twitter link later on that you can read the whole text. We have so many documents, not only from old documents, as some claim in the internet. We also have recent documents. This one is from Driebergen, from the Landelijke Politie, from the police, 25th of January 2018. It's a field office meeting that lasted 2 days. And it's a 13-page report. Let's go through it now. Present are the Belgians, the Dutch, the Australians, and the Ukrainians. So the first thing we noticed, like with the discussion about US satellite data.
No Malaysia.
Where are the Malaysians? So then there's introduction, everybody welcome. And then they start talking about their talking points. So, the committee didn't look at the results of the forensic investigations and the radar inquiry, but only, nobody can see it, because with my big body, I'm sitting in front of this.
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
Maybe I go away and read it out loud.
You have to push the button, don't go away.
I think Patrick can push the buttons.
I'm joking.
So, down the page, the committee didn't look at the results of the forensic investigation and the radar inquiry, but only considered the evidence we had on specific persons. The review committee indicates a problem regarding the intent of co-conspirators. It is difficult to anticipate how a court would look at this, as there is no Dutch jurisprudence in similar cases. So they anticipate there will be a problem with the evidence. So next slide, please. So we asked, where's Malaysia? We discussed this. The third slide, please. Next. Yeah. So when you want to accuse somebody of murder, then there must be intent You cannot accidentally murder somebody because then it's called manslaughter. So they're worrying about this in their discussions. Like Anne asks, another question is how relevant the fact is that the shooting down of MH17 could have been a mistake and the real intention was to shoot down a military plane. The separatists didn't have the right to shoot an airplane, whether it was a military or a civilian plane, unless they were combatants in an international armed conflict. Oleg from Ukraine, don't we have enough evidence to state that the separatists could have foreseen that it was a civilian aircraft? And then Manon replies, the committee stated that the Dutch Safety Board explicitly mentioned that not even military attachés were acquainted whether or not the airspace was closed for civilian planes. So how could the people on the ground know? Gerrit Thierry, he is the head of police in the Netherlands. Gerrit is talking about Russian influence in elections in several countries like Bosnia and Montenegro and parallels with Eastern Ukrainian conflict. Interesting. Marcia states that we are considering how deep we should get into these parallels or subject like the command structure and, for instance, the involvement of oligarchs operating in the background. It is a concern that the SBU, so the Secret Service of Ukraine, doesn't make enough effort at hearing relevant witnesses and persons of interest on the already long time ago shared list. So the Dutch are complaining that the Ukrainians are not working hard enough to collect witness statements. We're talking about January 2018, when the investigation is already ongoing for many years. Keep that in mind. The posting of our information on VK page, it's like the Russian Facebook, like for instance the bug image we posted there, can effectively bring us new witnesses. Okay?
Yeah, but only book witnesses. They're looking only for the book witnesses, yes. Of course.
So there is a report in the making of another suspect, Delphin, code name. It's not ready. And Oleg, the Ukrainian, says, we, the SBU, not the Russian-speaking officers at the field office, are monitoring potential witnesses as well as suspects and trying to get them on our side. Actually, we are in contact with someone who was on the launch site and we are trying to get that person to our side. Interesting, they're working on this?
Yeah, I thought that investigation is not supposed to take sides. But they're trying to get witnesses on their side, whatever it is. I mean, we kind of know what their side is. So and also, please bear in mind, it's 2018. Yeah. It's a document, a very recent document.
It's a discussion
and they're
piece
still
of the
having
field
troubles finding witnesses of a book missile or a book launcher.
So the Dutch also understand the investigation depends on the help of the SBU to do the interviews in Ukraine. The SBU is needed for witness opportunities, says David from Australia. We simply cannot move on with our investigation without them. So they're really stuck with the Ukrainians, if they want it or not. Oleg states that according to their law, a Ukrainian officer must be present during witness interviews in Ukraine. So you had the situation that Mr. Tsemak, he was hijacked, captured from Donbass, brought to Kiev. If the Dutch or the Australians want to interrogate him as a potential suspect, there would always be somebody from the Ukrainian Secret Service present. So you could imagine that would have put some strain on the way you can talk with such a person. Yes? We have that covered.
Only the SBU is able to locate witnesses and bring them in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oleg explains that the SBU continues to work on the case. There was no order to stop working on it. Okay, so why would that be possible to stop working on it? So there are times, like Anne has been told last time, she visited Kiev, that no one is actually working on the case. This SBU simply doesn't have the manpower. January 2018. Nobody in Ukraine working on the case. Let that sink in. In the Netherlands is the most horrific crime of the decade. And we are depending on Ukraine. And in Ukraine, nobody is working on the case. In January 2018, it is stated. And the witness we most recently identified among the witness statements received from the German authorities. So there is Germany that helps locating witnesses, will be interviewed by us within 2 or 3 weeks. The German authorities share their interviews with the Netherlands, but they do not allow us to share the interviews with the GIT. So Netherlands and Germany very close, but the Germans say don't give it to the Australians, don't give it to the Ukrainians, don't give it to the Malaysians, not even to the Belgians. One of these witnesses might be interesting for the state responsibility case of Ukraine. Frankly spoken, I don't know what that means, about which exact case they are talking, but there's a case against Ukraine. I would like to find more leaks. Well, there's this case, but let's not go into it now. Maybe Jana, you want to take over?
No, you're doing good.
Ah.
I'll just pop in.
Now they're talking about let's break the law. March and Anne put forward the question about the breach of Russia's sovereignty through the approach of witnesses who most probably reside in the Russian Federation without informing the Russian Federation authorities. So this is illegal. They're discussing what about we're going to do some illegal stuff. So the reactions, Belgium, absolutely no problem. This just for us is just a kind of investigation. And what about luring the witness? So, wow, it's getting interesting. Wouter from Belgium. In Belgium, they're very flexible. To lure the witness is no problem at all. David from Australia, he's not so convinced. David considers this could be a covert operation. It should be possible with the witnesses as long as there are no criminal offences are being committed. But again, he would have to ask the legal department of the Australian Federal Police. David is more careful than Wouter.
Oh, the last one is just...
And Oleg from Ukraine, there's no problem at all if Ukraine is not doing, but the Dutch are doing it. There's no problem. It's like a regular intelligence operation. And then Marcia states, we have to discuss this with Malaysia. Oh, they all forgot about Malaysia. Let's bring in Malaysia. Gerrit would like to let Malaysia know what the outcome of the discussion with each individual country is. That would make it easier for Malaysia to decide.
That might make it easier for Malaysia.
To decide.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, so there's all the JIT countries except Malaysia agree. Malaysia is not there, but they say, with the four of us, we already agree, so why...
Easier for Malaysia to decide if we all agree.
March asked for the opinions on engaging in interview suspects in the Russian Federation without the authorities being informed and involved. Oleg thinks it's a problem according to Ukrainian law. And Marcia, well, if it's not the GIT, but it's the Dutch acting alone. And then Lieve says, well, in Belgium, we heard before how flexible the Belgians are, but they're very, very lenient Supreme Court, but this wouldn't pass the test because it violates the rights of suspects. So the Dutch are discussing violating the rights of suspects. Just imagine. Lieve explains that it would not be a problem if they would make the suspect travel to another country. Well, that's why they talked about luring the witness. The Dutch are not stupid. Huh? So David thinks it in Australia can do.
It wouldn't be admissible according to Australian law either.
And Oleg, well, for us, for Ukrainians, no problem to lure the suspect if it's done by the Dutch. When it's the GIT, it becomes a different story. Marcia finalizes the discussion, saying, for this moment, enough is said. After consultation back home, it will be brought up again. We're not there. We're almost there. Lieve warns to be careful that it must not become a political board, and it might give the impression of not being independent. You might get the impression they're not independent. Of course they are, but they want to avoid the impression that they're not.
They're forming a new. They're talking about forming a new advisory board. Apparently,
and they shouldn't call it an advisory board. It's in the document. Don't call it advisory board. Australia says because it would seem that the Dutch need advice and they don't know what to do themselves. So you can all read it later. March amplifies that showing international support is the motive for creating this advisory board. Possibly there should be experts from other grieving nations. She suggests that Eurojust can be used to host meetings as Eurojust has done before in this case. So you have been some information about Eurojust, Patrick?
No, only that this is part of, in the same facility as the International Criminal Court. It's not too far from where we're sitting today.
Mm-hmm. March argues besides international communications, harmony is needed. What if the Dutch prosecutors conclude to manslaughter and others say manslaughter is not enough and reject the Dutch point openly?
Dutch point of view openly.
Yeah, so here you have a thing that the Dutch think maybe the evidence is not strong enough to accuse the guys for murder. So we instead do manslaughter. But
So
there could
what
be
do we do to make sure that they accuse them of murder? Basically, that's what it says. And again, is it an independent investigation or it has to support some country's point of view?
Well, it seems that some countries in the GIT insist it has to be murder. The charge has to be murder. Okay. And this I had to read a couple of times because maybe I thought this is another document. Feedback from the visit in London. Annie and Gerrit gave a feedback of their visit to London last week. Gary and Anne visited the United Kingdom to talk about UK experience in the, read well, Litvinenko case. The case officer and the SIO of the Litvinenko investigation explained various counter-strategies that they encountered from the Russian Federation. So the people from the GIT went to the UK to ask advice how to learn from the British how they dealt with the propaganda of the Russians in the Litvinenko case. I find it pretty remarkable.
And purely political.
Then we come to the day number 2, where we did only day number 1. Day number 2 was a little bit shorter, so I can go through it faster. The main issue is radar data analysis, January 26, 2018. About the Russian data, the radar data, the analysis consists of 2 separate analyses from the radar, and there were 2 Dutch experts, each checking one of the sets. The conclusions, there was no evidence of data manipulation, so they checked the Russian radar data, they couldn't find any fakes or manipulations. Also, there were no other objects in the vicinity of MH17, and third conclusion, supersonic missiles like the Buk would likely not have been detected by the radar due to its processing and display filters. About this third point, Mr. Lavrov stated that experts who understand a little bit about radar know how ridiculous this is. So expect, again, radar data to become a very important part in the upcoming court case. Yeah, so this I thought was also interesting about the radar data. They found 3 plots on the radar data that the Russians gave. Martje from the prosecution office, the Dutch prosecution office, asked Patrick whether there are any remaining unsolved questions. Patrick responds, it's not the case. Well, it is the case because there are 3 radar plots after impact of MH17. And according to Patrick, someone should explain that these plots could either be parts of the aircraft or of the missiles. They don't know what it is, but it should be explained as part of the aircraft or the missile to avoid questions about, they use the Dutch word complot theories. So it's complot, the English word is conspiracy. So to avoid questions about conspiracy theories in the later stage, let's just pretend that these 3 dots are from a missile or from the aircraft, the Boeing aircraft, but not from anything else. So I find this pretty remarkable. And then Gerrit, the head of the Dutch police, a brilliant man, he suggests we can use these radar findings in our advantage by using the media. Wow. And that's what they did, because worldwide it was like, oh, Russia gave the wrong data sets, not the original ones we asked. So this has been widely propagandized in the Western media.
But you know, today's news that next of kin, they're complaining that GIT didn't give them all the documents to study, the documents, the materials that were passed to the court. And that's exactly GIT's excuse, that they don't want media to, you know, to some leaks to the media so that they can influence, etc.
But they themselves,
Jana, using it to their advantage, using media.
So you have the prosecution team discussing a media strategy, how to make Russia look bad. That's the last part of the document we show you today.
Would you say, Max and Jana, that in this way the JIT are attempting to control the conversation, eliminate any, entertaining any alternative hypotheses, for instance?
No, I just seriously don't understand what the JIT is doing. Are they really investigating the case, or seriously, that's not their job. They're not PR agency for...
Or are they managing the narrative, is, you could say.
That's quite obvious.
Yeah, that is obvious. It's all very politicized. And I think it is essential what the previous part that we talked about, the 3 dots on a satellite, that they're just avoiding talking about. So 6 years, the investigation is ongoing, and they just close their eyes on the things that they don't want to talk about, investigate, dig into.
Things they don't understand, they explain away. It's remarkable.
That's unbelievable.
I might add, there's other examples of this right now in the news. You've probably heard of the OPCW leaks, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, internal leaks that show that the fact-finding mission, the findings of the engineers who are actually on the ground investigating the Duma chemical weapons attack that supposedly took place in April of 2018, their findings were buried, covered up by the executive level of the OPCW, and there seems to be political motivation with regards to that. Also, we found out covering the trial of the hearing of Julian Assange, his extradition hearing, which the first week just took place in London, according to Assange's defense team, fairly comprehensively dismantled all of the U.S. indictments against Assange with publicly available information, which means that the U.S. government has taken a political position to manipulate evidence and a narrative in order to convict the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. So what you're showing us, Max and Jana here, this is not the only example of this politicization of due process, the politicization of the justice system, or what should be unbiased, neutral investigation. So it's not unusual in this day and age, and it seems to me like there's a pattern that we're seeing more often with these high-profile events, of which MH17 is probably the most high-profile air disaster, I would say, in living memory at least. Yeah.
And from these documents, I think we get an idea that the official investigation doesn't have much, really. After 6 years, you see?
They have 36,000 pages, so... Well, about, like Hector Raybon says, a lot of weak evidence doesn't make one strong case. So maybe that would be a good conclusion for today. Patrick?
Yes, and also, did you want to say anything about the organization?
Oh, yeah. As we've already mentioned, and you saw a new video that we were able to produce for you to see. It was done thanks to people who donated money to us. Anybody can do so on our platforms and YouTube channel, etc. Patrick will say a few words about this later. But I also want to thank the organizers of this event, Global Rights of Peaceful People. We were lacking some finances for this trip to happen. It was a very important trip. We've got a lot of information from it. We're preparing a few more reports on that to be released later. So we're thanking them also for supporting us.
These peaceful people, they are from Ukraine, from Odessa, and they were, May 2, 2014, they were victims of the slaughter that took place. And maybe you all know it, about the Odessa massacre. And these people decided to collect money, get some support from rich business people to organize events worldwide to bring people closer together instead of setting each other on fire. So Oleg, I know you're very modest, but I want a very big applause for Oleg. Yeah, without them, we couldn't do the things we do. So
now, we might have time for just a few questions, but I want to ask a couple of questions. I'd like to get your confirmation on a couple of really important points. First of all, according to your investigations, you've already done, and Akash Rosen has done analysis on the phone wiretaps which were provided by the SBU early on, and then submitted later a separate set of wiretaps. But there's also evidence of manipulation of metadata, of visual, quote, evidence. And these are images that were found on the internet of book missile batteries in various positions. And this has been confirmed, hasn't it, on multiple fronts that there's been a manipulation of metadata. In other words, the photos weren't taken when they said they were supposedly taken.
Well, it's the Australian Federal Police that confirms it itself, and the documents were leaked. And the Australian Federal Police confirmed the documents are genuine, so they're authentic.
Yeah, but again, they're not analyzing original ones. They're still analyzing cropped ones. So of course, metadata there is different. So
There is also documents that were revised the days before they were made. So how is that even possible? So it's a mess.
So I think that's really important because, as you pointed out earlier, that these wiretaps, these photographs that were found by open source investigators were used to form the narrative initially that Russia supplied a Buk missile which shot down MH17, and that really solidified in the court of public opinion globally that the Russians did it, quote unquote, this visual and this audio evidence, which are both questionable now, right? Okay.
Well, what we have seen in the last 6 years, which I've never seen in my life before, I've looked at a lot of propaganda, but you have a prosecution team, you have suspects, you have a judge, and in the end you have a defense team. We have listened 6 years to media playing the prosecutor, even before the court starts. Russia is not on trial on Monday officially, but the whole world understands this is a case of Western countries against Russia. It has been extremely politicized. And if you're not following the reasoning of the prosecutors for 6 years, then you're a truther, you're a Kremlin troll, you're insulted in any kind of ways. But I think the only thing Jana and I and others who are critical, like Billy, are doing is we look at the evidence that is presented and we are not convinced, and we explain why we are not convinced. So how is it even possible that we are demonized before the court proceeding even starts? That's what I want to give to my colleague journalists. Before you write other hit pieces about us, think what you're doing and who are you defending. Are you a journalist or are you part of the prosecution team?
very good point. Thank you, Max.
And we want to open up for a few questions. Is there any members of the press who are present who would like to ask a question to the panel?
Yeah, that's the time.
This gentleman here on the right-hand side.
So unfortunately, my question will be in Russian because according to our standards, according to the standards of our media outlet Komsomolskaya Pravda, the question and the answer might be in Russian. So the question is to Lady Yerlashova. Вопрос следующий. С вашего позволения я задам вопрос на русском для радио «Комсомольская правда» и газеты «Комсомольская правда». Все-таки к каким выводам сейчас накануне очередного заседания суда вы пришли и в какой части ваши выводы противоречат тому официальному нарративу, который имеется?
Мы, Эдуард, спасибо за вопрос. Мы не рассматриваем теории, мы не приходим к выводам, кто это сделал. У нас нет полной картины. Мы исследуем только то, чем занималось официальное следствие. И на основании тех документов и того расследования, которое сделали мы можем со стопроцентной уверенностью говорить, что расследование политизировано, реальных фактов, доказательств нет. И у нас спустя 6 лет остается больше вопросов, чем ответов. Вот, собственно, все.
So in my half Russian, I translate in English. He asked, what do you think really happened with the Boeing? And Jana says, we're not into making theories ourselves of what happened. We're looking at the evidence, and we are looking at the evidence, and we conclude so far there's no convincing evidence at all. We are very sad that this is a politicized investigation, and we would like it to be other. Is that correct?
That's the gist. Yep.
Anyone else? No. Any press, media questions? Panel.
We also have time to talk with each other here. Yeah. It's maybe nicer than Q&A. Stay around, we can chat together.
I have a question to Billy Six. You talk about the possibility that there might be another rocket fired at the plane. I've looked at details of specifications of what a Sukhoi plane can carry on missile types. That make me wonder, like, what kind of missile could be carried by a Sukhoi or maybe by MiG that could make this kind of damage to the plane? Do you have any idea?
No, I never talked precisely about types of any possible fighter jets. For me, it was just a general investigation, and there's not enough data and not enough sources to do it. It would be speculation, and those kind of speculations are used by people who want to put us in bad light. So that's why I would avoid to talk.
Without going into technical details, the idea is that the Buk missile exploded about 4 meters away from the cockpit. You can imagine if that would be like a 70-kilo warhead, that if something exploded only a meter from the cockpit, and it's only a quarter of the warhead weight, it could cause the same type of damage. So there is discussions about this. Does that make sense? Okay.
May I add something about what Colonel Biedermann and Colonel Blix, who was not seen here, told me about the book? They say normally it explodes at a distance of, as they say, 10 to 15 meters away, and that would made it impossible to just destroy the cockpit. So it would be really, well, everything is possible in the end, but so many the issues which are so unlikely in the end makes it totally unlikely that it happened like that.
And one more question for Jana and Max. You collected and recovered some wreckage from the Donbass, and to your knowledge, not all of that wreckage made it to where it was supposed to go with the joint investigation team, or what was the story with that?
Yeah, first time we were able to recover some quite important pieces of wreckage, thanks to locals, of course. It's everything, because of the locals who are not indifferent to the situation, so they're trying to help. And there was a lot of wreckage that fell into people's gardens, all over the place, in the forests, in the fields. So some knew where to take this debris, some just brought them to the road, or some dump they threw away. So yeah, we got this wreckage, we brought it to the local mayor, we hand in this wreckage, and she's in contact with the Dutch, so they were able to come and pick those debris and bring them back to the Netherlands. That was DSB, that was technical, 2015. It's 1 year after the crash. Basically, I think they picked it up in August, and the final DSB report was in October. So these debris, they never made it on the mock-up of the plane. It's part of the cockpit, so you have to understand it's the upper part of the cockpit, supposedly very important parts of the plane. They never made it on the layout of the plane or in the final report, DSB report. They said there was not enough time for them to include them, but, well, I mean, isn't that important? Maybe you postpone your report or issue an update or anything. The only thing they did, I believe, they had a press conference. They showed the debris. Yeah, we got them. For the journalists who don't understand a thing about this, oh, okay, new debris, okay. But they never put it on the layout on display, yeah.
And I just want to clarify one point from your documentary, which I think is important, because even today, and you might comment on this phenomenon, even after certain things have been debunked factually or forensically, you're still seeing old narratives that have long been debunked or still being rehashed through the media. One of them is that the rebels or the separatists kept people from accessing the crash site. Technically, you debunked that in your film. The Malaysians did get access. Colonel Sakri's team, his team did get access, but not through it was the Ukrainian authorities, apparently, who were telling them to stay put in Kiev, and they went and he basically freelanced it, did his own mission there, worked directly with the Donbass
Borodai, yeah.
Borodai. So you debunked that in your documentary, but that's used to sort of demonize the Donbass, saying that they were keeping everybody from accessing the crash sites. You want to speak to these points? Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you want to say something?
Well, there were horrible types of propaganda, like Mr. Timmermans in the United Nations. Imagine some thug stealing the wedding ring, and then with a tear. That was disgusting. And about a rebel who was holding a small monkey doll. And it was like, oh, the rebels are making fun of the dead people, and even they make jokes about children. But then after that, he put the doll away, and he made a cross. So he was like very empathetic to these people. But even a few months ago, NewsEra showed again this portion of propaganda, this horrible type of propaganda, demonizing human beings. I think it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, but the sad thing is that you say that some things were debunked, and even with our important leaks, how many people are going to see this? How many people are going to know about this information? We're basically, for most part, we're ignored or insulted and put labels on. So they just, that's it. And the major narrative, it's everywhere. It's out of every corner, They tell people what to believe and what to think. And I also know that for sure that the Dutch, they influenced Malaysian next of kin. When I was in Malaysia, I did my research investigation with the help of local journalists. And I was able to hear, the person didn't know that I was listening. It's one of the next of kin. And she talked to the journalist and she said that she keeps close contact with the Dutch embassy in KL. And she answers to them which events she visits or not. So she was supposed to come to our documentary screening in KL, but then there was some misunderstanding with the organizers, and she's like, no, I have nothing. I don't want to have nothing to do with it. I'm going to have troubles with the, Dutch. And the thing is also that it's not Malaysian investigators who update Malaysian relatives. It's Dutch investigators who come specifically to Malaysia to bring them, all the material and all the data, and explain what also they have to believe. That was, for me, it was an eye opener, really. So.
I think that's probably all we have time for. Afterwards, any press or media, Max, Jana, and Billy are available for interviews while you're here. Or just as individual, yeah, additional comment, they are available. And also, I want to encourage people, if you haven't, or you're not familiar with Bonanza Media, I don't know, Max or Jana, if you want to say how they can best support your work going forward. The best portal.
Support us financially, or give us your email address so we can send you our newsletters. Many ways. Follow us on Twitter. Engage with us. Spread the information that we gave to you. I mean, be creative.
Ik heb Leo Stoter, ik kom uit Rotterdam. Ik zat destijds van het ongeluk zat ik in Nepal. Ik had een heel zwaar ongeluk gehad, dus ik had alle tijd van de wereld om alles te volgen. Toen heb ik iedere dag, u hoort het aan mijn stem, ik ga weer helemaal in de oude modus. Iedere dag na dat ongeluk heb ik zitten zoeken. En als Nederlander zit je nog ver weg. Maar ik ging wel op de Nederlandse sites kijken. Het voorlopig forensisch rapport. Op papieren, op wat ik heb gezien. Daar stonden hele andere dingen in die naderhand in het forensisch rapport zaten. Ik heb namelijk gezien. En ik durf dat onder Ede te bewegen. En ik hoop, heeft u het ook gezien?
Het is eigenlijk een meeting in het Engels. Ik heb niet alles gezien en we zijn eigenlijk aan het afsluiten.
Dit is heel belangrijk.
Ja, zegt u het maar.
Ik denk, I will talk in English, maybe that's better. I was in Nepal. I saw on the internet the first forensic report. And in the first forensic report, I didn't know what I saw. I cannot tell you the whole thing, but the part about the...
When was the first forensic report?
It was a few weeks after when they sent it back, probably to Holland. In maybe the third week, or I don't know, but in the beginning. Now it comes. I saw that in the paper stood, there were inslagen, how do you say that in English?
Impacts.
Impacts in the cockpit. Right upstairs in, left out. Left upstairs in and right out. And they were also mentioned the size. It was the size, I think, 30 millimeter. And this I have never seen back again. I have many times uttered to people.
It was the Canadian representative of the OCSE who said it. But I suggest we can talk about it afterwards. Is that okay?
Now it cannot be denied because I haven't heard in public any time this. And this is a proof of the... I don't want to get arrested right away, but this is the proof of how horrible government we have in Holland.
Thank you very much. I'm totally agree.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this public meeting and press conference. And we also be looking forward to further feedback and commentary on this. Obviously, the trial starts this week. We think it's going to be a long, drawn-out affair, potentially. So there will be more opportunity to revisit this in the future. But thank you very much. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Max, Jana, Billy Six, and also thank you.
More question?
Yeah.
More question?
Yeah, I think you allowed the public also to put a question. I have a very critical question, but it is an informative question, and I need to add a phrase to explain it, why I ask it. My question is, I understand your focus on this coming procedures, but did you also investigate inconsistencies, if any, in the Russian statements? Because as a layman, I know, I got the impression, maybe it's not true, that they first were focusing on this airplanes, and then later on they clung to this buck. And I will now first, before you answer, explain you why I ask this. Not only to give you the opportunity to be to prove that you're not biased, because I know you're not, but you see, I belong with Mr. Ayas to the people who think that you cannot win legally what you cannot win politically. And we also know that international procedures, not only international ones, are used for propaganda and so on. It is the continuation of war in another form. Now you are very surprised about narrative management by the prosecutor. Well, then you did not follow the Dutch prosecutor in many, many decades, because even in not political cases, they always do that. My question is this. We know that parties and a prosecutor are framing. That is quite normal in this world. But if geopolitics is decisive in the outcome, and we now know that the geopolitical situation is not static, because there is Mr. Macron,
We're slowly losing your question. So
sorry,
could you please
the question
wrap
is
up
this.
Yes?
In this shifting geopolitical situation wherein Europe is reaching out a hand to Moscow, maybe the shifting of the official statements by Moscow can be explained as tactics to have more room for their defense. Do you understand that that might be a possibility?
I understand, but it's more a statement than a question. But to come back to your question, Russian propaganda, because that's also what it is. It's not only Western propaganda, there's also Russian propaganda, is very helpless and very ineffective. And there is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who makes statements. There's Ministry of Defense that makes statements. There's Rosaviatia that makes statements. There's radar experts that make statements. There's the Union of Russian Engineers that make statements. And they all contradict each other. And then Mr. Putin, the president, he said, we have our version of events, but nobody is listening to us. Already 6 years I'm asking, what is the Russian version of events? I'm still having no answer. Was it fighter jets that shot the plane down? Was it a Ukrainian bug-tailer? Maybe was it a stolen book from Russia? There's no official Russian version that we can test. So that's about Russian propaganda.
Short and simple question. What can you tell us about the black boxes?
Now I wish that Colonel Sakri could talk. It's so unfortunate he's in the back of the room and he's not allowed to speak. About the black boxes, they have been recovered the first day, and they have been handed over to the Malaysian delegation by the rebels, and they have been brought to Kharkov and then flown by a Dutch plane with Malaysian delegation to Farnborough in the UK, and there they were opened and read out. Yeah, but the Malaysians, they have checked the numbers, that is absolutely from MH17, and they have been there while the boxes were opened, although they never got all the data readouts, but they were there while they were opened. And the non-data, but the last 30 minutes of the cockpit voice recorder was played, and they could hear a sudden stop of all the sounds. Is that answering your question, or you have a more specific question?
I don't know what is recorded on.
There's hundreds of things recorded, like so temperature, like altitude, change.
Talking of the pilots.
Yeah, you have black box. There's two black boxes. Yeah. They're orange in color. One is the cockpit voice recorder. That everything the pilots talk in the cockpit is recorded, all the sounds. And then there's the flight data recorder, and there you have all the technical things that are recorded, like the altitude, the speed, the increase or decrease of the plane, etc., etc.
No other sensors, so like approaching airplanes or something like that.
I'm not sure if the radar data is stored from the anti-collision radar. It could also be there. That I don't know, to be honest.
Could be very interesting for your report, anyway.
Well, the Dutch Safety Board has gone through it, and they have reported what they found.
Well, they are biased. We know that.
Okay. But I'm not. I would, even if you give me all the data, I couldn't do anything with it because I'm not an expert.
Okay, thank you.
Or, just a quick question on the black box issue. Are the data and voice recordings, is that to be made ever publicly available, or is it...
what has been published, but also in other crash events, there was no publication of all the data. So it's not uncommon that data is kept secret or not public.
Any other questions? We wrap it up.
Another question, a remark. How to make these people famous by helping us spread our paper on the subject. We have a beautiful picture of both of them. A Dutch paper on MH17. We have plenty of copies, so anyone that wants to inform their relatives, their colleagues, their neighbors. The launch is tomorrow, but of course we couldn't skip this event. We've got many papers. If you want, you can take some and spread them.
Thank you very much, Sander. I suggest we all grab one and we talk with each other with a cup of coffee.
And it is free. You don't have to pay.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Nou, ik weet niet of het geluid nu goed is. Ik ben nu bij de presentatie van MH17 nieuw bewijsmateriaal die door verschillende bronnen bij Max van der Werf en Bonanza Media terecht is gekomen. En ik ga kijken of ik iemand kan spreken hier over dit verhaal. En wat ik zie is het al erg druk. Ik ga even rondkijken. Jullie hebben onderzoek gedaan, jullie zijn al jaren bezig. eigenlijk het werk te doen wat de staat niet goed doet. Hè? Nederland staat in dit.
We controleren het. Ik zal niet zeggen, ze doen het niet goed, maar we hebben gewoon onze eigen ideeën over hoe je onderzoek moet doen.
Ja, maar waarom doe je dit?
Ja, ik heb dat ook jarenlang met Indonesië gedaan, oorlogsmisdaden van Nederlandse militairen onderzoeken. Het zit gewoon in mijn bloed om dingen te onderzoeken en geopolitieke zaken interesseren mij gewoon.
Ja, je spreekt Russisch inmiddels?
Nou, heel klein beetje.
Heel klein beetje.
Heel
Nou, vandaag hebben jullie dus nieuwe bewijzen, zeg maar, die stukken die jullie hebben in handen hebben gekregen, gepresenteerd. Daar zitten stukken tussen die van het JIT zelf zijn, heb ik begrepen.
Ja, het zijn allemaal leaks van het JIT. En het geeft gewoon een inkijkje in hoe er gedacht wordt en hoe er met bewijs om wordt gegaan en dergelijke. Dus ja, we zijn maar net begonnen.
Maar er zit dus iemand binnen het JIT, het JIT, die gooien jullie via anonieme e-mailtjes of hoe hebben we dat gekregen?
Het is zo dat wij willen praten over de inhoud van de documenten, maar niet over de bronnen of speculatie over hoe we eraan zijn gekomen. Daar hebben we geen commentaar.
Oké. Nou, er staat
het is om
duidelijk...
onszelf te beschermen en om de bronnen te beschermen. Ja. En in de tijd met Wikileaks en jullie en Assange zullen je daar begrip voor hebben, hoop ik.
De stukken laten in ieder geval zien dat het onderzoek heel gepolitiseerd is. Hè? Dat is eigenlijk best wel schokkend.
Maar het laatste document, de laatste regel, dat dus het hoofd van politie zegt van oh, deze radardata-informatie die kunnen we op zo'n manier uitleggen dat we de media daarmee kunnen beïnvloeden. Ja. Dat was wel heftig.
Daarnaast heb je jullie hebben nog meer gepresenteerd. Jullie hebben dit filmpje nog een keer gespeeld hè, van de Call of Justice. En daarna hebben jullie Billy Six heeft gepraat. Hij is een Duitse journalist. Jullie zijn tegengekomen daar in Oekraïne?
Nou, ik ken Billy al heel lang. Op een gegeven moment, het wereldje is natuurlijk klein. Als je onderzoek doet, je leest over elkaar, publicaties. Dus ik ben Billy een keertje via internet tegen het lijf gelopen. Dus we hebben contact gemaakt. Is die keer naar Nederland gekomen, ik keer naar Berlijn. En dan door de jaren heen vrienden geworden.
En ben je hem ook tegengekomen terwijl hij zijn onderzoek deed? Of is het gewoon een keertje afgesproken?
Nee, dat is puur toevallig. We hebben elkaar nooit ter plekke ontmoet.
Hij is dus op zoek gegaan ook naar die getuigenissen die de straaljagers hebben zien vliegen. Ja. En jullie hebben diezelfde getuigen...
ja, er zijn er gewoon heel veel.
Zijn er heel veel?
Ja, er zijn er ook heel veel die we nog nooit gevonden hebben.
Maar in het rapport van de JIT staat daar bijna niks over die straaljagers.
Nou ja, de gedachte is van, we weten zeker dat het een bug was, dus het maakt niet uit of het straaljagers waren. Terwijl mijn redenering is, ik wil een reconstructie hebben van wat er exact is gebeurd. Stel bijvoorbeeld, er waren straaljagers en de crew van een luchtafweergeschut probeerde die straaljager neer te halen. Ze misten en ze schoten de Boeing neer. Dus dat is relevant voor het hele verhaal. Ja. Het gaat om een totale, complete reconstructie.
Maar je hebt bijvoorbeeld die papieren die je van de militaire inlichtingendienst van Nederland hebt gekregen op een of andere manier. Er staan locaties alle bugs in het Rusland en in de Oekraïne en één kapotte die wat dichterbij stond. Waren dat alle bugs-installaties? Want Bellingcat die zei dat er eentje heel snel naartoe is gereden weer weg.
Nou, het zou kunnen dat de militaire inlichtingendienst niet competent is en dat open source social media warriors, zoals ze hem even noemen, het beter weten. Dat gaan we nou met de rechtszaak gaan we dat hopelijk zien. We hebben 36.000 pagina's bewijs door te ploeteren. Dus ik ben heel benieuwd. Stel nou dat het inderdaad zo is, dan is het wel heel erg slecht gesteld met onze militaire inlichtingendiensten. Dan moeten we daar misschien wat aan gaan doen.
Ja, maar Bellingcat zit hoofdzakelijk in een huiskamer ergens in Londen, geloof ik. Hè? Het zit een beetje uit te zoeken, maar jullie staan op het veld.
Ik wil over Bellingcat verder niks zeggen. Ik bedoel, ieder zijn eigen geloof.
Maar jullie lopen gewoon echt de Oekraïne heen. Jullie sjouwen met de wrakstukken, jullie praten met de mensen.
Ik ben nou 6 keer in het crashgebied geweest. Ja. Wil je nog Engelse vragen stellen aan Jana?
Ja, ook.
Doe maar.
Oké, dankjewel Max. Well, actually not much more than I asked Max already, but he said he wants to do it in English also.
Okay.
So how long have you been actually, I'm going to make a little bit more successful story about this, yeah? How long have you been going around the Ukraine doing investigation?
You mean in Donbass? How many times you went there,
Ukraine.
or time?
Yeah, how long, the total time you spent?
Well, I cannot tell you exactly how many days we spent there, but I've been to Donbass about 6 times now, I think. Mostly about MH17 case. Each time we go, we spend about 10 days. we wish we could spend more time there, of course, because there's always a lot of things to do. There's so much to do still on the ground in terms of the investigation.
So you're doing an investigation that actually is a lot of countries have a big political things at stake. Yeah. Did you see any? Did you notice any involvement of secret services or police that is trying to boycott your investigation?
You mean now, at the moment? Because
Well, all the time, I think. Yeah?
you saw in our documentary how we were trapped into coming into secluded apartments and talking to what seemed to be secret service, Dutch secret service agents. I don't know, but it sounded like it. They sounded like it. They prevented us from having an interview with a Dutch lawyer who represented next of kin and who was rooting for independent investigation. So that was my only encounter with presumably secret service that I know of. I don't know if we're sorry, you see,
Yeah.
I've been talking too much, so
Okay.
I'm already losing my voice. So I don't know if we're watched, is that what you're asking? But there was no open prevention of us doing the things we're doing.
So they think that basically they think they can control the information that you're presenting.
Yeah, I think that they think that we're so little,
Yeah.
you know, and they disregard us as something serious. But I think after today's event, it will be impossible for them to ignore
Yeah.
the facts and the evidence that we presented.
So you invited a lot of press today again, and I don't see much press, but the international press or the Dutch alternative press.
Well, you should ask the organizers about that, who
Yeah.
they invited. I'm pretty sure they invited a lot of people, international press, of course, Dutch press. I don't see anybody from Dutch mass media. Have you seen anybody present? So they're basically writing their articles, doing their reports without coming and, attending our event. I don't know how balanced of a reporting it is then, but it is what it is.
So the framing of you being a conspiracy theorist or a bunch of nutties that is trying to get some attention is keeping the press from coming here. It's the framing mechanism.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're labeling us basically, but I think we're too cool for conspiracy thinkers. Leaking official GIT documents, that's a bit, serious. Everybody should pay attention to that. You cannot avoid the fact that this is the official investigation.
So the evidence that you brought in, is that you think it's going to be used in the court case, MH17?
I would really hope so. For example, the audio analysis presented by digital forensic expert Akash Rosen, his analysis are accepted in court. That's what he does in Malaysia. He is an expert witness in court for many cases. In theory, if the judge would want to see his analysis on wiretaps, it is possible. It is a legit analysis.
Yeah. So what are you going to do if they don't take this evidence in?
Well, we continue working. We step by step. There is so much work to be done still, because we also, neither Max nor me, we have the complete picture yet. We still have some pieces of puzzle missing. So yeah, we'll be busy working.
Ja.
Beterschap nog?
Ja, dank je. Ja.
Beter?
Ja, elke keer een beetje beter. Ja. Je moet altijd een beetje voorzichtig zijn. Dus je moet altijd niet te lang blijven bij dit soort gelegenheden.
Ik had eigenlijk nog vragen voor jou verwacht.
Ja,
Was een beetje een vraag naar de bekende weg?
Bevredigd, nee, ja, vragen. Of ik dan nog vragen had, weet ik niet. Ik vond die vraag van Alfred Feeling wel interessant over de Russische kant. Hè, en dan vond ik het antwoord ook wel interessant. Dat is natuurlijk wel iets wat je kunt afvragen. Van, hè, met deze mensen wat... in hoeverre zijn ze ook kritisch over de Russen. Hè? En, ik denk eigenlijk dat het eigenlijk wel voldoende gecoverd wordt door de Nederlandse media. Dus dat het eigenlijk niet echt nodig is om dat ook nog een keer te doen. Je herhaalt eigenlijk wat er allemaal al over gezegd is.
Jij hebt het boek geschreven, hè, over MH17 zelf.
Ja.
Jij bent uiteindelijk met onderzoek een beetje gestopt. Doe je het nog steeds een beetje erbij?
Nou ja, met het onderzoek gestopt. Kijk, wat ik met het boek heb gedaan is eigenlijk niet zo meer dan dat ik heb gezegd van nou, dit zeggen de Russen. Het is alweer heel lang geleden. En dit zeggen de Russen en dit zegt de westerse pers. Dit zijn de argumenten. Kijk maar hoe valide het is. Ja. Dus, en ik heb ook gekeken naar wat hier ook aan de orde kwam, is in hoeverre de media van het begin af aan de zaak hebben geprobeerd te manipuleren. Dus dat is een heel belangrijk aspect geweest. Maar, en daarna dan ben je al gauw een deskundige omdat je een boek hebt geschreven. Dus ik heb daarna wel veel interviews gegeven, dingen nog wel uitgezocht. Ik hou dingen bij. Maar ik word ook altijd wel een beetje moe van het onderwerp in die zin dat je gewoon zeker weet dat die onderste steen komt gewoon helemaal nooit boven.
Denk je dat het wel zin heeft om dit soort dagen te organiseren nog?
Ik heb heel veel waardering voor de mensen die dit doen en respect. En ik vind het ook heel interessant dat ze bijvoorbeeld nu met allerlei gelekt materiaal komen. Dat is een hele nieuwe ontwikkeling.